I've always believed that family is everything. Growing up, I thought our family was unbreakable. Together through thick and thin, bound by shared memories, laughter, and Sunday dinners that felt like the heartbeat of our home. My father was my hero. He was strong, steady, and someone I could always count on. And my mother, well, she was the heart of it all. She held everything together, no matter what. But that all changed, and I never saw it coming. I never imagined that one decision, one unthinkable demand from my father, could unravel everything we had built. I remember that evening like it was yesterday. It was just an ordinary night. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. I was sitting in my room, going over my notes for work when I heard my father's voice calling me from the living room. Something about the way he said my name sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just his usual commanding tone. It was different, quieter, almost uncertain. I walked into the living room and saw my mother sitting on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, like she was trying to avoid something, or maybe she didn't know how to look at me anymore. The tension in the air was so thick, it felt like I could cut it with a knife. My father's face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something cold and distant, like I was seeing a stranger for the first time. He asked me to sit down, and when he spoke, his voice trembled. It wasn't the voice of the strong man I had always known. It was the voice of a man who had been carrying something heavy for far too long, and now he was about to release it onto me. Before I begin, let me ask you, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below. I'd love to know how far my story is reaching. Before I could even sit down fully, he looked at me and said the words that would change everything. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "Something your mother doesn't have the strength to do." At that moment, I felt the world shift beneath me. What could he possibly be asking? And why was my mother so silent? Why did she look like she was holding her breath? Her face was pale, her eyes glistening with something that looked a lot like fear. Before I tell you what he asked, you need to understand. My father wasn't a bad man. Not in the way you'd think. But I couldn't understand it then. I didn't know what he meant by his demand. And I was too afraid to ask, too afraid to break the silence. Before I continue, I want to thank all my amazing subscribers for your unwavering support. You all help keep this channel growing. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more stories like this. My father, he was always the one who held everything together. At least, that's what I used to believe. He was a man of rules, a man who demanded respect, who ran his business and his family with a strict hand. Growing up, I loved him with all my heart. He was my hero, my protector. But as time went on, I began to see things differently. His control over his business, over our lives, became stifling. We weren't allowed to breathe without his approval, to think without his permission. Every decision, every moment was filtered through his lens. But for years, I accepted it. I didn't know any other way. It wasn't until 2 years ago that everything started to fall apart. That's when he left. For her, a younger woman. The one he said was everything my mother could never be. And just like that, our family was broken. My mother, who had been the heart of our home, suddenly became a shell of herself. And me. I stopped waiting for him to come back. I couldn't keep holding on to a man who had already made his choice. It wasn't an easy thing to admit, but the truth was clear. I couldn't fix what was broken. I couldn't fix him. So I put it all behind me, or at least I tried to. But the emptiness left by his absence didn't go away. I would find myself sitting in the house that used to be filled with laughter and love, now just an empty shell. The silence was suffocating. And my mother? She became more distant with each passing day. Her once warm embrace now a memory I couldn't hold on to. And then one morning, everything shifted. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, trying to start the day, when I saw his car pull into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. He hadn't come around in months. Not since he left. Not since he shattered everything. I knew the moment he got out of that car. This wasn't just a visit. He had a reason for coming, and I didn't like the feeling that settled in my stomach. "Dad," I called, trying to keep my voice steady as I opened the door. He didn't respond immediately, but when he finally looked up, there was something about his eyes. Something distant, almost like he was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. "Morning, Emma," he said casually, as if nothing had changed. But his tone was off, like he was hiding something. "Morning, Dad," I replied, forcing a smile, but the tension in the air was thick. His presence was too much, but not in the way I remembered. It wasn't comforting anymore. It was suffocating. He told me he needed help with something, a light on the porch that had gone out. But I never mentioned anything to him about it. It felt like an excuse, and I knew it, even if he didn't admit it. We started talking, small talk at first. How things had been, how the weather had been warmer than usual. But as we stood there, something shifted. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened, but suddenly, it felt like we were standing too close. His hand brushed against mine as he reached for the doorframe. It was just a touch, but it felt like an electric current shot through me. I quickly pulled my hand back, hoping he hadn't noticed the way my heart raced. But he didn't look at me, didn't say anything. And for the first time in years, I felt that familiar pull. That pull toward him, the pull of wanting something that I knew I shouldn't. Something that I didn't understand. Why did I let him in? More than just to fix a light. It felt like something else was breaking open inside me. The distance between us, the years of silence, suddenly felt smaller than I expected. And as I watched him walk to the porch, something inside me shifted. I wasn't sure what was happening. I wasn't sure I could stop it. I wasn't prepared for what would come next, but deep down, I knew this moment would change everything. If you're feeling the tension build up as much as I am, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps the channel grow, and I want to know if you're hooked just like I am. Stay tuned. 2 days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house was quiet, too quiet. The tension that had lingered between us ever since Dad's visit was now more pronounced, thicker in the air. I kept replaying our last conversation in my mind, trying to understand why it felt like something was breaking open inside me. Why was I feeling so drawn to him, to his presence? It wasn't just the light or the porch anymore. He was coming back again. I wasn't prepared for what he was about to say. I wasn't ready for the truth, for the weight of what would shatter my world even further. When he knocked on the door that evening, it felt like my heart skipped a beat. I knew it wasn't a normal visit. I could feel the weight of what he was about to confess before he even stepped into the house. "Dad," I said, my voice a little more than a whisper. He didn't immediately answer, just stepped inside, his expression distant but resolute, as though he had made some kind of decision. I could see the internal struggle in his eyes, something deep within him begging for release. "Come sit down, Emma," he said, his voice shaky. He gestured toward the kitchen table, but there was no warmth in his tone. Not the father I remembered, the one who would laugh with me, who'd tease me about my stubbornness. This man was a stranger. His eyes, those eyes that used to comfort me, now held something colder, something heavier. "Dad, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But I could feel the knot forming in my stomach, tightening with each passing second. He sat down, not looking at me. I could hear his breath, shallow and labored, as though he was holding something back. "Emma," he began slowly, his voice trembling. "There's something I've been keeping from you. From all of you." He hesitated, and my heart seemed to beat louder in my chest. I could tell this wasn't just about our family anymore. It wasn't just about some small mistake he was confessing. "I've been seeing someone," he said, his words hanging in the air, thick and heavy. I froze. I wanted to scream, to ask what the hell he was talking about. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The weight of his words crushed me, and for a moment, I felt like the room was closing in on me. "I never meant for it to go this far, but it did," he continued, his voice breaking. "She's been a part of my life for years, Emma. And now there's a child involved." His words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to leave the room, to run as far away as I could, but I couldn't. The man who had been my father, who had always been my rock, had just confessed to shattering everything we built. A child, I whispered, unable to process what he was saying. It wasn't just an affair. It was a life, a whole other existence he had kept hidden from us. And now it was a child, his child, someone he had never mentioned before. I didn't know what to feel. Betrayal? Yes. Anger? Absolutely. But compassion? There was something inside me that wanted to understand. I wanted to hear him out, to know the truth of how this had happened. But could I? Dad, I said, my voice breaking. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep this from us? From Mom. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. How long were you planning on hiding this? How long were you planning on keeping this family, this secret from us? His eyes filled with tears, and in that moment I saw him, really saw him, as a man, not just my father. He wasn't the strong, confident man I'd always known. He was fragile, vulnerable, and broken in a way I had never imagined. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt your mother. But I couldn't keep this secret anymore. I couldn't live with it. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't know how to respond. My heart was racing, and I felt a mixture of emotions that were so overwhelming, I could barely breathe. As he reached for his coffee, his hand brushed mine. It was brief, just a touch, but it was enough. The spark that ignited between us in that moment wasn't just emotional. It was something deeper, something that terrified me. I pulled my hand back, but the connection lingered, and I could feel the shift inside me, the shift that I wasn't ready for. I wasn't prepared for the flood of emotions that came rushing forward. A touch that wasn't accidental. Something was changing between us, and neither of us knew how to stop it. But little did I know, this confession was just the beginning, and what would come next would leave us all questioning everything we thought we knew about love, loyalty, and trust. If you're enjoying this story as I am, don't forget to share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Let's see what happens next together. It was almost like the days started to blend together after that night. The weight of my father's confession still hung in the air, but now something else began to take its place, something heavier, more complicated. The visits from my father became more frequent. At first, I told myself it was just him trying to make amends, just trying to fix the broken pieces of our family. But soon, those visits stopped being about repairs or small talk. They were about something else, something I couldn't quite name. He came not to fix anything but just to be there, to spend time with me. I found myself looking forward to these moments. The way he looked at me, the way he listened, really listened, like I was the only one in the world. I hadn't felt that in years. The kind of attention that made me feel seen, understood in a way I didn't even know I needed. It wasn't love, not in the way I thought I knew it. But in the silence of our conversations, there was a kind of connection that scared me more than I wanted to admit. He had a way of making me feel both small and important at the same time. The kind of quiet intimacy that couldn't be ignored. There were still days when I felt like I was betraying my mother by even allowing him into my life like this. But when he smiled at me, when he sat across the table, his gaze lingering just a little too long, I couldn't seem to pull away. It wasn't just the past he was trying to rebuild with me. It felt like he was rebuilding something in himself, something that had been lost, or maybe never there to begin with. And then it happened. One evening, after we had finished dinner, we sat together in the living room. The conversation had gone from mundane to something more personal, unsettling, even. The weight of our silence was like a slow-moving river, and then he said it. "I think about you more than I should," he whispered, his voice quiet but filled with meaning. My heart stopped for a second, but I didn't know how to react. The air felt thick, suffocating, and in that moment, I realized something that sent a chill through my bones. What he was saying wasn't just about regret. It wasn't just about a family falling apart. It was something far more dangerous, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. "Do you think about her when you're here?" I asked, the words barely leaving my lips before I realized how loaded they were. His eyes darted away from mine. He didn't respond immediately. The silence between us grew, thick and heavy, as if the room had become a battleground. The tension was unbearable, and I felt myself at war with myself. I had already betrayed my mother by not confronting him sooner. But now, the weight of his confession, the depth of his words, the way he'd looked at me just now, it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about something else, something I had been too afraid to face. The truth was right in front of me, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to deal with it. I couldn't deny it anymore. The truth was out there, but was I ready to face it? I looked at him again, trying to see the father I once knew, the man who had been my hero. But he wasn't that man anymore. He was someone else, and so was I. The lines between family loyalty and personal desire were beginning to blur, and I didn't know where to draw the line. Leave me a comment telling me what you think I should do next. Would you confront the truth, or let it go? I read and replied to every comment. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and the warmth of family, now felt like a distant memory. My father had tried to make amends, tried to repair the bond we once had. But the damage was done. No matter how many times he apologized, no matter how many flowers he brought or how many attempts he made to fix things, the truth had already crept into every corner of our home, and it was impossible to ignore. I could feel the distance growing with each passing day, not just between my father and me, but between my mother and everyone else. The once unbreakable foundation of our family had cracked wide open, and nothing would ever fit back into place the way it had been. The more he tried to fix things, the more I realized some things couldn't be undone. I didn't know where I stood anymore. My heart, once so certain in its love for him, now felt heavy. How could I love someone who had torn apart everything we'd ever known? But then again, he was my father. He was the man who had raised me, who had taught me to be strong, to always protect the ones I loved. How could I throw him away just like that? The emotional conflict within me grew each day. My heart wanted to protect him, to forgive him, but my mind wouldn't let me. It was as though my emotions were at war with the reality of what he'd done, and I was stuck in the middle, unable to choose a side. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. What do you do when the person you love most has shattered the very thing you thought was unbreakable? One evening, when the house was eerily quiet, I found myself standing in front of his desk, an overwhelming need to know the truth pulling me closer. There, in the dim light of his study, I found it, another letter. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, reading the words carefully. The letter wasn't just about regret. It was a confession. A final confession that revealed more about the second family, about the woman who had been in his life all these years, and the dangerous secrets he'd kept to protect them. This was the truth we all feared. But was it too late to undo the damage? The more I read, the more the pieces began to fall into place. The reasons behind his actions, the fear, the guilt, the desperation to keep it all hidden. And then came the question I had been avoiding. What do I do with this information? Do I confront him with it, force the truth to the surface, and watch our family fall apart completely? Or do I pretend that everything's okay, that the damage isn't as bad as it seems, and try to hold on to the illusion of normalcy? Sometimes betrayal isn't just about love. It's about the unspoken truths that fester in silence. I spent hours thinking about it. I couldn't stop asking myself what was the right thing to do. And in the end, I realized something important. Love, true love, isn't perfect. It's not about pretending that nothing has happened or ignoring the things that hurt. It's about facing the truth, no matter how painful it is, and finding the strength to move forward. Some families break. Others find a way to rebuild, but it's never the same again. In the weeks that followed, we tried. We tried to rebuild piece by piece. My mother agreed to counseling, not for him, but for herself. She needed to heal, to understand why he had done what he did. My sister, still unsure, began talking to him again, but it wasn't the same. And me. I learned something I never expected. Betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about secrets, lies, and the trust that's broken when the truth stays hidden too long. Love isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about having the courage to face the truth, no matter the cost. Like this video if you enjoyed the story. Subscribe if you want to see more. Share this story with someone who needs it, and turn on the notification bell so you can be the first to know when I post more. Let's keep this conversation going. And don't forget to watch my previous videos for more stories like this.